Some love stories don't begin with butterflies. They begin with lies disguised as promises. And Reese Blunt was about to learn the difference between a man who says forever and a man who means it. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and hope. Reese stood in the tiny kitchen, flour dusting her dark hands as she rolled out dough for the apple pie Bruce Dave claimed reminded him of his childhood. She hummed softly, the kind of melody that comes from a heart too full to stay silent. Through the window, autumn leaves danced in the fading light, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, marking the end of another Sunday. "Baby, I'm home!" Bruce's voice echoed through the cramped hallway, and Reese's face lit up like he just announced the sun itself had arrived. She wiped her hands on her apron and rushed to him, her smile so genuine it could have melted winter. Bruce caught her in his arms, but his embrace felt different, looser, distracted, like hugging someone while thinking about somewhere else. "I made your favorite," Reese whispered against his chest, breathing in the cologne she'd saved up to buy him last Christmas. "Apple pie, just like you love it," Bruce pulled back, glancing at his phone. "That's great, babe. Really great." But his eyes never left the screen. Reese noticed but swallowed the observation. Love she'd learned from her late mother meant giving people grace when they forgot to be present. "How was your day? You said you had that big presentation." "Exhausting," Bruce muttered, loosening his tie as he walked past her toward the bedroom. "I need to shower. We'll eat after." She stood alone in the doorway, watching him disappear, the warmth of the kitchen suddenly feeling colder. 3 years they'd been together. 3 years of building a life in this small apartment where the pipes rattled and the neighbors argued through paper-thin walls. 3 years of believing that love was enough to build a castle, even if you only had sticks. Reese returned to the kitchen, sliding the pie into the oven. She'd decorated their home with care. Plants on every windowsill because Bruce once said he liked greenery. Photographs in mismatched frames, chronicling their journey from strangers to soulmates. Sticky notes with love messages hidden in places he'd find throughout the day. This place was tiny, but it was theirs, or so she thought. When Bruce emerged from the shower, he was dressed in clothes she'd never seen before. A designer shirt with the tag still barely visible under the collar. Pants that probably cost more than their monthly rent. Reese's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You look handsome," she said carefully. "Where did you get those?" Bruce smoothed down his shirt, admiring himself in their cracked hallway mirror. "Got a raise. Figured it was time I started looking the part, you know. Can't keep showing up to important meetings looking like I shop at discount stores." Reese felt something twist in her chest, but she pushed it down. "That's wonderful about the raise. We could finally fix the heater before winter." "I was thinking," Bruce interrupted, not looking at her, "maybe it's time we upgraded more than just my wardrobe." "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, and in his eyes was something she'd never seen before, judgment. "I mean, look around, Reese. We've been stuck in the same place for years. Same apartment, same routine, same everything." "I thought you liked our home," Reese said softly, feeling her hands begin to tremble. "You said it was our kingdom." Bruce laughed, but it wasn't the laugh she'd fallen in love with. This laugh was sharp, cutting. "I said a lot of things, back when I didn't know any better. But I'm moving up now, and I need to surround myself with people and things that match where I'm going, not where I've been." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Reese tried to smile, tried to keep the peace, tried to be understanding like her mother had taught her. "I can change too. Tell me what you need and I'll—" "It's not about what I need," Bruce said, his voice hardening. "It's about what makes sense. I got invited to a fundraiser gala next month. All the senior partners will be there, with their wives and girlfriends. Women who know how to dress, how to talk, how to carry themselves in those circles." "I can learn," Reese insisted, her voice breaking just slightly. "I can buy a nice dress. I can—" "With what money?" Bruce shot back. "Your daycare salary? Reese, you make barely enough to cover groceries. I'm carrying us financially, and now I'm expected to carry us socially too." The cruelty of his words struck her like a physical blow. Reese worked long hours at the community daycare, pouring her heart into children who came from broken homes, who needed someone to believe in them. She'd never thought of her work as insufficient. She'd thought of it as purpose. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Though she didn't know what she was apologizing for, Bruce's phone buzzed, and his entire demeanor changed. His face softened. His lips curved into a smile Reese used to think belonged only to her. He typed quickly, his thumbs flying across the screen, completely absorbed. "Who is it?" Reese asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Just work," Bruce said too quickly, pocketing his phone. "Look, I'm going out tonight. Networking event? Don't wait up, but I made dinner. The pie, save me a piece," he said, already heading for the door. "I'll probably be late." And just like that, he was gone. Reese stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the meal she'd prepared with love, and felt the first real crack in her heart. She turned off the oven, watched the golden pie through the glass, and wondered when exactly Bruce had stopped seeing her as his partner and started seeing her as his burden. The apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. She sat at their small dining table, the one they'd bought together from a thrift store and refinished by hand, and tried to remember the moment things changed. When had his touch become mechanical? When had his compliments turned into criticisms? When had we become I?
Her phone rang.
It was Janelle, her best friend from childhood. "Hey girl, just checking on you." Janelle's warm voice filled the silence. "You sound tired. Everything okay?" Reese wanted to say yes, wanted to protect the image of her perfect relationship, but something in her finally broke. "Janelle, I think I'm losing him." "What happened?" "Nothing. Everything. I don't know anymore. He looks at me like I'm not enough, like I never was enough, and I keep trying to fix whatever's broken, but I can't figure out what it is." "Baby, listen to me." Janelle's voice grew firm. "If a man makes you feel like you need to shrink yourself to fit his life, he's not your man. He's your prison. But I love him. I know you do. But does he love you back? Or does he love the idea of someone waiting at home while he builds his empire?" Reese didn't have an answer. After they hung up, she sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the building, other families laughing, arguing, living. She pulled out an old photograph from their first year together. Bruce's arms were wrapped around her, his smile genuine, his eyes full of adoration. The man in that picture looked nothing like the man who'd just walked out their door. "What happened to us?" she whispered to the empty room. The pie cooled on the counter, uneaten. The candles she'd lit burned down to nothing, and Reese Blunt fell asleep at the table, her head resting on her arms, dreaming of a version of Bruce who no longer existed, if he ever had at all. Chapter 2. The Slow Death of Us. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from sleeping next to someone who's already left you. They're there in body, but their soul packed its bags long ago. Reese woke to an empty bed. Again. Morning light filtered through the curtains she'd sewn by hand, casting soft shadows across the sheets that still smelled like Bruce's cologne, but held no warmth of his body. She reached across the mattress, her fingers finding only cold fabric. The clock read 9:30, which meant he'd left hours ago without saying goodbye. She sat up slowly, her body heavy with the weight of accumulated disappointments. In the bathroom, she caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. When had the light gone out of her eyes? When had the smile she wore become a performance instead of a feeling? The apartment was exactly as she'd left it the night before. The uneaten pie still sat covered on the counter, the candles burned to stumps, the dining table set for two, with only one chair disturbed. She cleaned it all up mechanically, moving through the motions of living without actually feeling alive. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bruce. Meeting ran late. Staying at Derek's place tonight. Don't worry, don't worry. As if those two words could erase the fact that he hadn't come home, hadn't called, hadn't cared enough to let her know before she'd spent half the night listening for his key in the lock. Reese got dressed for work. Choosing the bright yellow dress Bruce once said made her look like sunshine. She needed to remember who she was before his opinions started rewriting her identity. At the daycare, she was still herself, still valued, still needed, still enough. The children rushed to greet her when she arrived, tiny hands grabbing at her legs, voices calling Miss Reese, Miss Reese, in a chorus that momentarily filled the hollow space in her chest. She scooped up little Timothy, who had a gap-toothed smile and a tendency to cry when his mother dropped him off. "You came back," Timothy said, as if her return was a miracle. "I always come back," Reese promised, kissing his forehead. If only Bruce felt the same certainty about her presence in his life. The day passed in the beautiful chaos of children, wiping tears, tying shoes, reading stories with different voices for each character, settling disputes over toys with the wisdom of Solomon. This was where Reese felt purposeful. These children didn't care about designer clothes or networking galas. They cared that someone showed up, paid attention, and loved them unconditionally. "Miss Reese, why do you look sad?" asked Maya, a perceptive girl who noticed everything. "I'm not sad, sweetie, just thinking." "My daddy says thinking too much gives you wrinkles," Maya replied seriously. "You should smile more." "You have a pretty smile." Reese forced her lips to curve, but it felt like lifting weights. "How's that?" "Better," Maya said, satisfied, before running off to play. When Reese returned home that evening, Bruce was there, sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone with the television, playing something he wasn't watching. He looked up briefly when she entered. "Hey," he said flatly. "Hey," she echoed, setting down her bag. "I got your text. You stayed at Derek's." "Yeah, it was late, didn't want to wake you." "Liar," a small voice in her head whispered, but she didn't voice it aloud. Instead, she moved to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. The same routine they'd had for years, except now it felt like playing house with a stranger. "I was thinking," Bruce said from the couch, not looking at her, "maybe you should consider a different line of work." Reese froze, knife hovering over the vegetables she was chopping. "What? The daycare thing? It's noble, sure, but it's not exactly impressive when people ask what you do. My colleague's wife manages a boutique hotel. Another one runs her own consulting firm. And then there's you, making minimum wage watching other people's kids." Each word was a needle. Reese set down the knife carefully, afraid of what she might do if she kept holding it. "Those children need me. Those children will be fine. What about what I need?" She turned to face him, really face him. "What do you need, Bruce?" "Tell me, because I've been trying to figure it out for weeks, and I still don't understand what changed." Bruce finally looked up from his phone, and in his eyes was something worse than anger. It was indifference. "I need someone who gets it, who understands that I'm building something here, and I can't do it alone. I need a partner who elevates me, not holds me back. I've never held you back, haven't you?" He stood pacing. "Every time I get invited somewhere important, I have to make excuses for why you can't come. Every time someone asks what you do, I have to dress it up to sound better than it is. Every time I look at our life, I see someone content with mediocrity, and it's exhausting." The room spun. Reese gripped the counter to steady herself. "You said you loved our simple life. You said all you needed was me and this little apartment and dreams we'd build together. I said a lot of things. People change, Reese. I've grown. Maybe you should too." "Grown into what?" "Someone who tears down the person they're supposed to love. Someone who's ashamed of the woman who stood by them when they had nothing." Bruce's jaw tightened. "Don't make this about loyalty. This is about reality. I'm moving in different circles now, and you don't fit." The truth, delivered so casually, shattered something fundamental inside her. Reese felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. Not when he'd already taken so much. "I see," she whispered. "Do you?" "Because I'm not sure you do. Look at yourself, Reese. Really look. Your hair, your clothes, the way you talk, the way you carry yourself. It's all so ordinary, and I need extraordinary." She wanted to scream that she'd been extraordinary enough when he had nothing, when his dreams were just wishes whispered in the dark, when she'd been the one believing in him while everyone else doubted. But instead, she turned back to the cutting board and finished making dinner in silence. They ate without speaking. Bruce scrolled through his phone between bites, occasionally smiling at whatever message appeared on his screen, messages from a world that didn't include her, from people who were extraordinary enough to deserve his attention. After dinner, he announced he was going out again. Another event, another night of her eating alone and falling asleep, wondering where her Bruce had gone and who this stranger was that wore his face. Before he left, he paused at the door. "By the way, we're invited to a gallery opening next week. It's black tie. Try to find something appropriate to wear, okay? And maybe do something different with your hair. The natural look is fine for the daycare, but..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The door closed behind him, and Reese stood in their apartment, no, his apartment, because it had stopped being theirs the moment he stopped seeing her as an equal, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the girl who'd believed in forever. She cried for the man who'd promised it. She cried for the love that was dying so slowly she'd watched every painful breath. Her phone rang. Janelle again. "I'm coming over," Janelle said, not waiting for Reese to speak. "I'm fine." "No, you're not, and I'm not letting you sit alone in that apartment with a man who's too blind to see what he has. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Put on the kettle." When Janelle arrived, she took one look at Reese's face and pulled her into a fierce hug. They sat on the couch, tea growing cold in their cups, while Reese finally spoke the truth she'd been avoiding. "He's going to leave me, isn't he?" Janelle held her hand. "Baby, he already has. He's just too coward to make it official." "What do I do?" "You remember who you were before him. You remember that your worth isn't determined by whether some man recognizes it. You remember that you are extraordinary, Reese Blunt, and if he can't see it, someone else will." But Reese wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. She was still clinging to the hope that the Bruce she loved was buried somewhere under this stranger's skin. That maybe if she just tried harder, became better, changed enough, he'd come back to her. She didn't know yet that some people don't come back. They just take pieces of you with them when they go. Chapter 3. The night truth broke. Her hell isn't a place of fire and brimstone. It's a kitchen table where the man you love looks at you with eyes full of hate and tells you the miracle inside you is a mistake. Reese had been feeling off for weeks. The nausea came in waves, usually in the morning, but sometimes in the afternoon when she was reading to the children. The fatigue was overwhelming. She'd fall asleep on the couch before dinner, wake up exhausted, drag herself through days that felt twice as long. Her breasts ached, her sense of smell intensified, and she found herself crying at commercials about dogs finding their forever homes. She'd been afraid to acknowledge what her body was telling her. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter, 2 pink lines screaming a truth she wasn't sure how to feel about. Pregnant, she was going to be a mother. In any other timeline, with any other version of Bruce, this would have been a celebration. They'd talked about children before, late-night conversations where he'd described the kind of father he wanted to be, how he'd teach their kids to ride bikes and stand up to bullies, how he'd love them the way his own father never loved him. But that was before. Before the distance, before the criticism, before Bruce became someone she no longer recognized. Reese sat on the closed toilet lid, holding the test, trying to imagine telling him. Maybe this would bring him back. Maybe a baby was what they needed to remember why they loved each other. Maybe this child could be the glue that held them together instead of the wedge that drove them apart. She had to try. Reese spent the whole day planning. She left work early, stopped at the market for ingredients, and prepared his absolute favorite meal, roasted chicken with garlic potatoes, green beans sautéed with almonds, and a salad with the vinaigrette dressing he always praised. She bought candles, the expensive kind that smelled like pine forests. She wore the blue dress he'd once said made her look like she belonged in a painting. She wanted everything perfect for the moment she'd change both their lives forever. Bruce came home around 7, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. He stopped when he saw the table set, candles flickering, Reese standing there with a nervous smile. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone more suspicious than pleased. "I wanted to do something special," Reese said softly. "I made your favorite. Can we just have dinner together, just us?" Bruce sighed like she'd asked him to climb a mountain. "I was planning to head out later. Gerald's having people over." "Please," Reese said, and she hated how desperate she sounded. "Just one dinner. It's important." Something in her voice made him pause. He glanced at his phone, then back at her. "Fine, one dinner." They sat down, and for a few minutes it almost felt normal. Bruce ate, complimented the food, and Reese's heart lifted slightly. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe he did still care. "This is really good," Bruce admitted, reaching for more potatoes. "You've always been good at this, I'll give you that." Reese took a deep breath. It was time. "Bruce, I need to tell you something." He looked up, chewing. "What?" Her hands trembled in her lap. "I know things have been difficult between us lately. I know you've been frustrated, and I've been trying to understand, trying to give you space to figure out what you need. But something happened that I hope, will make you see that we're still a team, that we're still building something together." Bruce set down his fork slowly. "Reese, what are you talking about?" She met his eyes, tried to smile through her fear. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Reese had ever heard. Bruce's face went through several expressions: shock, confusion, and then something that made Reese's blood run cold: anger. "You're what?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Pregnant," Reese repeated, her voice smaller now. "We're going to have a baby." Bruce stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. No, this isn't happening." "Bruce, I know it's unexpected, but—" "Unexpected?" He laughed, but it was harsh, cruel. "Are you kidding me right now?" "Please tell me you're kidding." Reese stood too, reaching for him. "I'm not. I'm really pregnant, and I know we didn't plan this, but maybe it's what we need. Maybe this baby can what?" Bruce shouted, making her flinch. "Can trap me? Is that what you think?" "Trap you?" "Bruce, this is our child, our baby." "How is that trapping you?" "Because I don't want it." The words exploded out of him, each one hitting Reese like a physical blow. "I don't want a baby. I don't want to be tied down. I don't want this life anymore." Reese felt the room tilting. "You don't mean that, don't I?" Bruce's face was twisted with rage. "I've been trying to figure out how to end this for months, and you just made it 1,000 times more complicated. You did this on purpose, didn't you? You knew I was pulling away, so you got yourself knocked up thinking it would make me stay." "That's not true," Reese whispered, tears streaming down her face now. "I didn't plan this. It just happened, and I thought you'd be happy. You used to talk about being a father. I used to say a lot of things." Bruce cut her off. "I used to think you were what I wanted too, but people change, Reese. I've changed. My life is different now, and you and some baby don't fit into it." "How can you say that?" Reese was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "How can you stand there and tell me our child doesn't fit into your life?" "Because it's the truth." "You want to know what I really think?" "I think you got pregnant, hoping it would fix whatever you think is broken between us. But you can't fix something that was never right to begin with." "Never right." "Bruce, we've been together for years. We've built a life." "You built a life," he corrected coldly. "I've been trying to build a career, to become someone important, and you've been dragging me back to this mediocre existence. And now you want to add a kid to the mix? Do you have any idea what that would do to my future?" Reese couldn't breathe. The man standing before her was a complete stranger. "What about our future? What about us?" "There is no us," Bruce said, his voice dead. "There hasn't been for a while. I've just been too much of a coward to say it." "So what are you saying?" Reese asked, though she already knew. She could see it in his eyes. The decision had already been made. Bruce walked to the closet and pulled out the overnight bag Reese had packed weeks ago. She'd filled it with newborn clothes, tiny socks, a blanket her mother had crocheted before she passed. She'd been preparing for the day they'd need to rush to the hospital, imagining Bruce holding her hand through labor, both of them crying happy tears when they met their child. Bruce held the bag out to her. "Take this and get out." Reese stared at him. "What?" I said, "Get out. This is my apartment. My name on the lease. I want you gone. Bruce, please, now!" He shouted so loud the neighbors probably heard through the walls. "Get out of my house. I don't want you here. I don't want that baby. You ruined everything, Reese. Everything I was building, everything I was working toward. You destroyed it all because you couldn't just let me go." Reese grabbed the bag with shaking hands. "I loved you. I gave you everything. And it wasn't enough," Bruce said coldly. "It was never going to be enough." He walked to the door and opened it. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, the sky as dark as the moment felt. Reese looked back at the apartment, their home, their memories, their life, and saw none of it reflected in Bruce's eyes. She stepped into the hallway, and Bruce slammed the door behind her with such force the sound echoed through her bones. Reese stood there, bag in hand, belly carrying a life that had just been rejected before it even had a chance to exist in its father's world, and realized she had nowhere to go. No family left, no savings. She'd spent it all trying to become the woman Bruce wanted. No backup plan, because she'd never imagined needing one. The stairwell lights flickered. Rain pounded against the building's roof, and Reese Blunt walked down those stairs out into the storm and into the darkest night of her life. Behind her, through the thin apartment door, she heard Bruce's phone ring, heard his voice shift from anger to warmth as he answered, "Hey, beautiful, sorry about that. Had to deal with something. Yeah, I'm free now. I'll meet you there." And just like that, Reese understood. There had been someone else all along. Chapter 4. Alone in the Storm. Some nights swallow you whole, and this was one of them. Rain like needles, darkness like drowning, and nowhere safe to surface. Reese walked without direction, her feet splashing through puddles that soaked through her canvas shoes. The rain plastering her blue dress to her skin like a second layer of misery. The bag Bruce had shoved at her grew heavier with each step, filled with tiny clothes meant for a future that had just been incinerated. The city at night was different when you were homeless. Streetlights created small islands of visibility in an ocean of shadows. Businesses were shuttered, their windows reflecting nothing but her own bedraggled image. Cars passed without slowing, their headlights briefly illuminating her before leaving her in deeper darkness than before. Where was she supposed to go? Reese's phone buzzed. A text from Bruce. "Left some boxes by the door. Come get your stuff tomorrow between noon and 2. I'll be out." The coldness of it, reducing her entire existence to a 2-hour window for collecting boxes, made her stomach turn. She didn't respond. What was there to say? Her legs finally gave out at a bus stop bench outside a closed coffee shop. She collapsed onto the metal seat, the rain still pouring, and pulled the bag onto her lap like a shield. Inside were tiny white booties, a onesie with yellow ducks, the blanket her mother had made. Reese traced her fingers over her mother's stitches and felt the weight of her absence like a fresh wound. "Mama, I don't know what to do," she whispered to the rain. "You always knew what to do, and I'm so lost without you." Her mother had died giving birth to Reese's younger sister, who'd only lived for 3 days before joining her in heaven. Reese grew up carrying the guilt of being the daughter who survived, the one who'd somehow been worth the cost. And now here she was, pregnant and abandoned, wondering if her child would curse her existence the same way she'd sometimes cursed her own. The cold seeped through her wet clothes and into her bones. She wrapped her arms around her still flat stomach, an instinctive gesture of protection. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the life inside her. "Your daddy doesn't want us, but I promise you, baby, I'll want you enough for both of us. I'll figure this out. But how? With what money? With what plan?" Her phone showed the time, 11:30. Janelle would be asleep, and Reese couldn't bring herself to call anyway. What would she say? That she'd been right? That Bruce really had left? That Reese was now pregnant and homeless in the middle of a thunderstorm? A car turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the rain. Reese expected it to pass like all the others, but instead it slowed, pulling to a stop directly in front of her. It was sleek, black, expensive, the kind of vehicle that didn't belong in this neighborhood at this hour. The window rolled down smoothly, and Reese instinctively stood, ready to run. She'd heard stories about women picked up off streets, about good intentions that masked terrible outcomes. But then a voice emerged from inside the car, gentle and concerned, in a way that made her pause. "Are you all right?" Reese peered through the rain at the driver. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Worry, recognition, something else she couldn't name. "I'm fine," she lied, because what else was she supposed to say to a stranger? "You're soaked through and it's freezing. Please, let me give you a ride somewhere. Anywhere you need to go." "I don't know you," Reese said, her voice shaking from cold and fear. "I'm not getting in a car with someone I don't know." The man hesitated, then slowly opened his door and stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a suit that somehow remained crisp despite the weather, holding an umbrella he hadn't bothered to use for himself. He approached carefully, holding the umbrella over Reese, even as rain soaked his shoulders. "My name is Kevin Gibson," he said quietly. "And I know this is going to sound strange, but I know you. Or rather, I knew someone who loved you very much." Reese stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "My mother," Kevin continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She was at St. Catherine's Clinic before she passed. You volunteered there. You sat with her during her final days. You sang hymns and held her hand when I couldn't be there because I was working. You made her last days bearable. And I've thought about thanking you every day since." The memory came flooding back, a frail woman with kind eyes who'd squeezed Reese's hand and called her an angel, Mrs. Gibson, she'd asked. Reese to sing Amazing Grace over and over, saying it reminded her of her own mother's voice. Reese had stayed overnight twice, refusing to let Mrs. Gibson die alone when her son was stuck in important meetings across the country. "I remember," Reese whispered. "She was beautiful. I'm sorry you lost her." "I'm sorry I wasn't there more," Kevin said, and there was genuine pain in his voice. "But you were. You gave her something I couldn't, peace. So please let me do this one thing for you. Let me make sure you're somewhere safe tonight." Reese wanted to say no, wanted to maintain her independence, her dignity, something. But she was so tired, so cold, so completely broken that she couldn't find the strength to refuse. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, the words costing her everything. Kevin's jaw tightened. "Then come with me. I have a guest room. No expectations, no obligations. Just a dry place to sleep in warmth. In the morning, we'll figure out what you need. Why would you help me? You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything," Kevin said simply. "My mother died smiling because of you. That's a debt I'll never be able to repay." Reese looked at the car, then back at the empty street, then down at the bag in her arms. Every option felt impossible, but staying here would kill her slowly. At least with him there was a chance. "Okay," she whispered. Kevin held the umbrella steady over her as they walked to the car. He opened the door himself, helped her inside, and carefully placed her wet bag in the back seat like it contained precious cargo. The interior was warm, leather soft, and completely surreal after the harsh reality of the bench. As Kevin drove through the rain-slicked streets, Reese stared out the window at the city passing by. They moved through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer, buildings that grew taller and more elegant, until finally they arrived at a high-rise that looked like something from a magazine. "This is where you live?" Reese asked, her voice small. "It's just a place," Kevin said, as if luxury apartments with doormen and marble lobbies were normal. "Come on, let's get you warm." The elevator ride was quiet, except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Kevin stood at a respectful distance, never crowding her space, never making her feel threatened. When they reached his floor, the top floor, naturally, he led her down a hallway to a door that opened into an apartment so beautiful it took Reese's breath away. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked expensive but somehow welcoming. Art on the walls that probably cost more than every possession Reese had ever owned combined. And yet Kevin moved through it like it meant nothing. "The guest room is this way," he said, leading her down a hallway. He opened a door to reveal a space twice the size of the apartment she'd just been evicted from, complete with an attached bathroom and a bed that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. There are towels in the bathroom, clothes in the dresser that should fit. They're from various sizes. "I keep them for—" He trailed off, then started again. "The door locks from the inside, if that makes you feel safer. There's a phone on the nightstand that connects directly to building security. And in the morning, we'll talk about next steps. Is there anything else you need right now?" Reese shook her head, overwhelmed by the kindness of a stranger when the man who'd promised to love her had shown only cruelty. "Thank you," she managed to say. Kevin nodded. "Rest well, Reese. You're safe here." After he left, Reese locked the door and stood in the silence of the most beautiful room she'd ever been in. She walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawling below. Thousands of lights, millions of lives, and somewhere down there was Bruce, probably already in the arms of whoever he'd been talking to on the phone. Reese showered in a bathroom with heated floors and water pressure that felt like a massage. She dressed in borrowed clothes that smelled like lavender fabric softener. And finally, she climbed into a bed so soft she almost cried. She placed her hand over her stomach, where a tiny life was growing despite the chaos around it. "We survived tonight," she whispered. "That's something, right?" "We survived." Outside the window, the storm finally began to clear. Chapter 5, The Invisible Guardian. They say angels walk among us, and sometimes they drive black cars and pay your rent when you're not looking. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment, Reese forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. Bruce, the rain, the stranger named Kevin, the impossible softness of the bed beneath her. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from yesterday's emotional devastation. On the nightstand, she found a note written in careful handwriting. "There's breakfast in the kitchen whenever you're ready. Take your time, Kay." Reese ventured out cautiously, following the smell of fresh coffee. The apartment looked even more impressive in daylight. Sunlight streaming through those massive windows, casting golden rectangles across hardwood floors, so polished she could see her reflection. Kevin stood in the kitchen, cooking something that sizzled in a pan, dressed more casually now in dark pants and a simple shirt. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "I hope you slept well. I made scrambled eggs and toast, but if you don't eat eggs, I can make something else. I have fruit, yogurt, oatmeal." "Eggs are fine," Reese interrupted softly. "Thank you." They sat at a kitchen island that probably cost more than her yearly salary, eating in comfortable silence. Kevin didn't pry, didn't ask questions, just made sure her plate was full and her water glass never empty. "I need to be honest with you," Kevin finally said, setting down his fork. "I didn't just happen to find you last night." Reese's body tensed. "What do you mean?" "I saw you walking in the rain, and I recognized you immediately from the clinic. I've thought about you often over the years, wondered how you were doing, whether you ever knew how much you meant to my mother. When I saw you out there looking so lost, I couldn't just drive past. So you followed me?" "I made sure you were safe," Kevin corrected gently. "There's a difference. And now I'm going to continue making sure you're safe, whether you let me help directly or whether I do it from a distance. That's not negotiable." Reese didn't know whether to be grateful or frightened. "I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's gratitude. You were there for my mother when she needed someone most. Now let me be here for you." Over the next few days, Kevin kept his word in ways Reese didn't discover until much later. He helped her retrieve her belongings from Bruce's apartment, not by going himself, but by sending professional movers who packed everything efficiently while Bruce wasn't home, sparing Reese the humiliation of another confrontation. He connected her with a lawyer who reviewed her rights, free of charge. helped her find a small studio apartment in a safe neighborhood with rent she could actually afford. Except Reese didn't know Kevin had called the landlord and paid the first 6 months up front, telling them to claim it was a special promotion for new tenants. Every week, groceries appeared at her door. Prenatal vitamins, ginger tea for her morning sickness, fresh fruit, proteins, foods she'd mentioned once in passing that she missed being able to afford. The deliveries always came with generic receipts from a community pantry program Reese had apparently been randomly selected for. She believed it because she needed to believe she could still do this alone. Reese returned to work at the daycare, pouring herself into the children who needed her. But she was constantly exhausted now, the pregnancy draining her energy in waves. She'd lean against walls during nap time, close her eyes while the kids were occupied, push through days that felt like climbing mountains. One afternoon, she fainted. One moment she was bending down to pick up scattered crayons. The next, she was waking up with the daycare director hovering over her. Phone in hand. "I'm calling an ambulance," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "No, I'm fine," Reese protested, trying to sit up. "I just need water." "Honey, you went down hard. We need to make sure you and the baby are okay." At the hospital, doctors told her what she'd been ignoring for weeks. She was severely anemic and dangerously underweight. The stress was literally eating away at her body, and the baby was starting to suffer. "You need to rest more, eat more, stress less," the doctor said, as if these were simple instructions instead of impossible commands. "If you don't, we could be looking at serious complications." Reese nodded mechanically, wondering how she was supposed to stress less when her entire life was stress. How was she supposed to eat more when groceries cost money she didn't have? How was she supposed to rest more when she had bills to pay and a baby coming and no partner to share the burden? When she left the hospital, Kevin's driver was waiting outside. "How did you—" Reese started. "Mrs. Patterson called me," the driver said calmly. "Mr. Gibson wanted to make sure you got home safely." His name was Thomas, and he'd been Kevin's driver for years. He was older, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that reminded Reese of her late grandfather. "I can take the bus," Reese said weakly. "With respect, ma'am, you just fainted. Mr. Gibson would never forgive me if I let you take the bus. Please, it's no trouble." During the drive, Thomas talked about his own daughter who'd gone through a difficult pregnancy. He didn't pry into Reese's situation, didn't make her feel pitied, just shared his own story in a way that made her feel less alone. "Mr. Gibson is a good man," Thomas said as they pulled up to her building. "Doesn't advertise it, doesn't want credit for it, but he's been helping people quietly for years. If he's taken an interest in your well-being, you're in good hands." "Why would he care so much?" Reese asked. "Just because I was kind to his mother?" Thomas met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Because that's the kind of man he is. He sees someone struggling and can't not help. It's in his nature." After Thomas drove away, Reese climbed the stairs to her studio apartment, a walk that shouldn't have been difficult, but left her winded and dizzy. Inside, she found another grocery delivery waiting, this one including a note. "Please eat. Please rest. Please let someone care about you." A friend. She knew who the friend was, but Kevin was smart enough never to sign his name, never to make it official, never to make her feel like accepting help meant admitting defeat. That night, Reese made herself a proper meal for the first time in weeks. As she ate, she thought about the strange guardian angel who'd entered her life at its darkest moment. She thought about Thomas's words, about Kevin's quiet kindness, about how some people show love through grand gestures while others show it through groceries and paid rent and making sure you're never truly alone. She placed her hand over her growing belly. "There are good people in the world, baby," she whispered. "Maybe we found one." Outside her window, a black car sat parked across the street, its driver watching to make sure her lights came on, that she made it home safely. Kevin had instructed Thomas to check on her every evening without being obvious about it. Some angels wear wings. Others wear suits and pay rent and make sure you eat. And sometimes they do it all while never asking for a single thing in return. Chapter 6. When Angels Carry You. The human body has limits, and Reese discovered hers on a Tuesday afternoon when the world went black and gravity stopped working. She'd been walking home from the daycare, bags full of papers to grade and crafts to prepare for tomorrow's activities. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded her of better times. She remembered thinking how beautiful it was, how her baby would one day see sunsets like this, and then nothing. Her legs simply gave out. One moment she was walking, the next the ground rushed up to meet her and everything went dark. In the void, Reese dreamed of her mother. They were in their old kitchen, her mother's hands covered in flour, humming gospel songs while making biscuits from scratch. "Baby girl," her mother said without looking up, "you're trying to carry too much by yourself. Even the strongest rivers need banks to hold them." "Mama, I don't have banks anymore," Dream Reese replied. "I'm just water spilling everywhere." "That's where you're wrong," her mother smiled, finally meeting her eyes. "Look around you, baby. The banks are there. You've just been too proud to see them." When Reese opened her eyes, she was moving, no, being carried. Strong arms held her securely, and a voice kept repeating her name like a prayer. "Stay with me, Reese, please stay with me. Kevin." She tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick, her throat dry as desert sand. Above her, the sky spun in dizzying circles. She could hear Kevin talking urgently to someone. "Yes, she's breathing, but barely conscious. I'm bringing her in now. Have a team ready. Kevin?" Reese managed to whisper. His face appeared above hers, and the naked fear in his eyes shocked her more than the fact she'd collapsed. "Don't try to talk. You're going to be okay. You and the baby are going to be okay. I promise." Reese wanted to ask how he'd found her, why he was here, but darkness pulled her under again. The next time she woke, she was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped rhythmically around her. IV tubes snaked into her arm, and Kevin sat in a chair beside her bed, looking like he'd aged a decade in a day. His suit jacket was draped over the chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and there was blood on his collar. Her blood, she realized. "You're awake," he said, relief flooding his features. He stood immediately, pressing the call button for the nurse. "How do you feel?" "Ah, heavy," Reese croaked. "What happened?" "You collapsed. Severe anemia, dehydration, malnutrition. The doctor said your body was shutting down because you weren't taking care of yourself." His voice cracked slightly. The baby's heartbeat was dangerously weak. Reese's hands flew to her stomach. "The baby is okay," Kevin assured her quickly. "Stable now." But it was close, Reese. Too close. A nurse bustled in, checking monitors and making notes. Behind her came a doctor who introduced herself and explained the situation with careful patience. Reese's body had been running on empty for too long. The pregnancy was high risk now. She needed complete rest, proper nutrition, and someone to monitor her constantly. "I'll be fine," Reese insisted weakly. "I just need to—" "You need to stop," Kevin interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "You need to let someone help you before you kill yourself trying to do everything alone." After the doctor left, Reese and Kevin sat in silence. Finally, she asked what she'd been wondering since she woke up. "How were you there? How did you know I'd collapse?" Kevin looked uncomfortable, choosing his words carefully. "Thomas has been doing evening checks, making sure you got home safely. He called me when he saw you fall. I was only a few blocks away. You've been having me followed." "I've been making sure you're safe," Kevin corrected. "There's a difference. That's what stalkers say. Stalkers have bad intentions. Mine are simply to ensure you don't die on a sidewalk because you're too stubborn to accept help." His voice softened. "Reese, you're killing yourself. Can't you see that? And I'm doing what I have to do." "Why? Why does it have to be this hard? Why won't you let me help you properly, instead of these scraps of assistance you pretend not to notice?" Reese turned her face away, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Because if I accept help, it means admitting I failed. It means Bruce was right, that I wasn't strong enough, that I needed someone to take care of me, that you're human. Kevin moved closer, his voice intense. Reese, needing help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart enough to recognize when the load is too heavy to carry alone. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Reese closed her eyes. My whole life, people have left. My father left before I was born. My mother died having my sister, and my sister died 3 days later. I grew up in foster care, being passed around to people who saw me as a paycheck. The only person who ever made me feel wanted was Bruce, and he threw me away the second I became inconvenient. I'm alone, Kevin. I've always been alone. And accepting your help, letting myself depend on you, what happens when you leave too? What happens when you decide I'm not worth the trouble anymore? The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. Kevin sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the IV lines. I watched my mother die slowly over 3 months. Every day I'd visit, and every day there'd be some new indignity, pain she couldn't escape, treatments that made her sicker, hope that evaporated like morning dew. Do you know what she talked about during those final days? Reese shook her head. You. She talked about the volunteer who sang hymns, who held her hand, who made her laugh even when laughing hurt. She said you were proof that angels existed. And on her last night, when I finally managed to fly back from a meeting that couldn't wait, except it absolutely should have waited, she made me promise something. What? Kevin met her eyes. She said, find that girl, the one who sings. If you ever get the chance to help her, to be for her what she was for me, don't hesitate. Don't let pride or fear or anything else stop you. Promise me. So I promised. And then she died, and I spent years wondering if I'd ever get the chance to keep that promise. His voice grew rough with emotion. When I saw you in the rain that night looking broken and lost, I knew this was it. This was my chance to honor the woman who gave me life by protecting the woman who gave her dignity in death. So no, Reese, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to be exactly what you need for as long as you need it, because that's what I promised my mother, and I don't break promises to the dead. Reese was crying openly now. I don't know how to let you. You don't have to know how. You just have to say yes. They stared at each other across a space that felt both infinite and intimate. The baby needs blood transfusions, the doctor said, returning with charts. We need a donor match, and unfortunately you're a rare type. We're searching our database, but it could take time we don't have. Kevin stood immediately. Test me. Mr. Gibson, the chances of you being a match, test me anyway. 30 minutes later, a nurse returned looking shocked. You're a perfect match. 1 in a million odds, but you're compatible. Kevin didn't hesitate. He rolled up his sleeve. How much do you need? Sir, this isn't a small donation. The amount we'd need to stabilize both mother and baby. How much do you need? They took enough blood that Kevin's face went pale, and nurses insisted he sit down. But he refused to leave, sitting beside Reese's bed as his blood, literally his life, flowed through tubes into her body, into the baby's body, giving them both a chance to survive. Why would you do this? Reese whispered, watching the transfusion. You don't even know me. Kevin's eyes were starting to unfocus from the blood loss, but his voice remained steady. I know you sang to my dying mother. I know you hold other people's children like their treasures. I know you're carrying a baby whose father threw you away, and you're still fighting to give that child a good life. I know enough. The transfusion took hours. Kevin never complained, never asked to stop, even when nurses worried he was giving too much. Finally, when they disconnected him, he tried to stand and immediately stumbled. You need to rest, the nurse scolded. You just gave enough blood to save 2 lives. Your body needs recovery time. But Kevin just lowered himself back into the chair beside Reese's bed. I'll rest here. And he did, For 3 days, Kevin Gibson, a man who probably had empires to run and fortunes to manage, sat in a hospital room, holding vigil over a woman who'd once shown his mother kindness. On the 3rd day, when Reese woke feeling stronger and saw him still there, she finally understood something her mother had tried to tell her in that dream. Some people don't leave. Some people build banks around your river and call it privilege to do so. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kevin looked up from the book he was reading. "For what?" "For being here. For the blood. For everything." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "You're welcome. Now, when we get you discharged, you're coming home with me. Kevin, non-negotiable. Doctor's orders say you need constant monitoring, proper meals, and 0 stress. My home has guest rooms, a full kitchen, and complete privacy. You'll have your own space, your own independence. I won't hover, but you'll be safe, and you'll be taken care of, and that baby will have the best chance possible." Reese knew she should refuse. Should protect her pride, maintain her independence, prove she could do this alone. But her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Even the strongest rivers need banks." "Okay," Reese whispered. "Okay," Kevin's smile widened. "Okay." Chapter 7, Trust Built on Ashes. They say you can't build a house on broken ground. But sometimes the strongest foundations come from learning how to trust again after trust has been shattered. Kevin's mansion wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary that breathed and sighed with a peace Reese hadn't felt in months. Her guest suite had windows facing east, so morning light painted everything gold. The bed was soft without being suffocating. The bathroom had a tub deep enough to swim in, and someone had already stocked it with pregnancy-safe soaps and oils. "The kitchen is always open," Kevin had told her on that first day. "Help yourself to anything. There's a housekeeper who comes twice a week, but she's very discreet. If you need privacy, just leave a note on your door. And please, Reese, treat this like your home, not like a hotel where you're afraid to touch anything." But Reese spent the first week walking on eggshells anyway, terrified to disturb the pristine surfaces, to eat too much food, to exist too loudly in a space that clearly belonged to someone far more important than she was. Kevin noticed, of course. One evening he knocked on her door holding a plate of cookies. "I made these," he said, looking almost shy. "Well, I attempted to make them. They're probably terrible, but I figured terrible cookies are better than no cookies, right?" Reese took one cautiously. It was burnt on the bottom, undercooked in the middle, and the sweetest thing anyone had done for her in months. "It's perfect. You're a terrible liar," Kevin laughed. "But I appreciate the effort." He sat on the floor outside her room, never presuming to enter, and they talked while Reese ate cookies that tasted like charcoal and kindness. "Tell me about the daycare," Kevin said. "What made you want to work with children?" Reese considered the question. "When I was in foster care, there was this one woman, Mrs. Chen, who ran a daycare out of her home. She wasn't my foster mother, but she'd let me come after school and just be. She never made me feel like I was taking up space or asking for too much. She'd let me read to the little kids, help with snacks, play pretend games where everyone got to be a hero. For those few hours every day, I wasn't the girl nobody wanted. I was just me." Her voice grew soft. "I wanted to be that for other kids. Wanted to create a space where being yourself was enough, where you didn't have to earn love or prove your worth. You just got to exist and be celebrated for existing." "That's beautiful," Kevin said quietly. "Bruce thought it was naive. Said I was wasting my life on other people's problems instead of building something that mattered." Bruce was an idiot. The certainty in Kevin's voice made Reese smile despite herself. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Kevin worked from home most days, giving Reese space, but remaining available if she needed anything. He cooked elaborate breakfasts, not because he was particularly good at cooking, but because he'd read that breakfast was important for pregnant women. His omelets were always slightly runny, his toast perpetually burnt, but Reese ate every bite because they tasted like effort and care. He'd leave books on her nightstand, not self-help books or parenting manuals, but novels about adventurous women and poetry that made her cry, and memoirs by people who'd survived impossible things. He'd adjust the thermostat before she even realized she was cold. He'd play soft jazz in the evenings because he'd noticed it relaxed her. Most importantly, he asked her questions, not invasive ones about her past or her pain, but simple ones about her present. What did she think about the sunrise that morning? Did she prefer strawberries or blueberries? What song made her smile? What dream did she have that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with joy? Kevin was teaching her, slowly and patiently, that someone could care about her without needing anything in return. The baby's first real kick came on a Wednesday. Reese was reading in the library, a room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that smelled like leather and old paper when she felt it. A flutter, then a distinct push from inside, like someone knocking to say hello. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Kevin looked up from his own book across the room. "Are you okay?" "The baby," Reese breathed. "The baby just moved." Kevin was beside her in seconds. "Are you in pain? Should I call the doctor?" No, it's good. It's just..." The baby kicked. Tears streamed down her face. "The baby is really in there." "Of course the baby is really in there," Kevin said gently. "Where else would it be? I know, but it's different when you can feel it. When it's not just something the doctor tells you or something you see on an ultrasound. It's real. There's a whole person inside me, Kevin, and they just said hello." Kevin's expression softened into something achingly tender. "Can I?" He gestured toward her stomach, leaving the question unfinished. Reese nodded, taking his hand and placing it over the spot where she'd felt the movement. They waited in breathless silence, and then it happened again, a small bump against Kevin's palm. His face transformed with wonder. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh, hello there, little one." And then Kevin Gibson, this composed man who ran businesses and commanded rooms, started crying. "I'm sorry," he said, trying to wipe his eyes. "I don't know why I'm—" "Don't apologize," Reese said, crying too. "This is the first time anyone has celebrated this baby being alive. Bruce made me feel like it was a curse, but you're crying because you felt it kick. You're crying because it's real, and that matters more than you know." From that moment on, Kevin talked to the baby constantly. He'd sit beside Reese in the evenings, his hand resting lightly on her growing belly, telling stories about his childhood, or describing the world waiting outside, or making ridiculous promises. "When you're old enough, I'm going to teach you to ride a bike," Kevin said one night. "And I'm going to be the kind of person who runs behind you holding the seat until you find your balance. And then I'm going to let go without telling you, because that's when you truly learn to fly. And when you fall, because everyone falls, I'm going to be right there to help you back up and remind you that falling just means you were brave enough to try." Reese listened to these promises, these commitments to a child that wasn't his, and felt something shifting in her chest. Trust maybe, or hope, or the beginning of understanding that not everyone who enters your life plans to exit dramatically. One evening, while Kevin was making his signature terrible cookies, Reese found photographs in the library. His mother's face smiled up from frames, a beautiful woman with Kevin's eyes and a warmth that radiated even through glass. "She looks happy," Reese said when Kevin found her there. She was. Even at the end, when she was in so much pain, she'd find things to smile about. Stupid things, like the way pigeons walked or how Jell-O wobbled on a spoon. "She taught me that joy is a choice you make, not a circumstance you wait for." I wish I could have known her better. Kevin sat beside her. "You gave her dignity when she was losing everything else. You gave her music when words became too hard. You gave her humanity in a place that often treats patients like problems to be solved. You knew her where it mattered." Reese looked at this man who'd given her blood, shelter, safety, and never asked for a single thing in return. "Why do you do all this?" "All what?" Take care of me. Take care of a baby that isn't yours. Give up your privacy and your freedom to help someone you barely know. Kevin met her eyes steadily. Because my mother taught me that the most important thing you can do in life is show up for people when they need you. Not when it's convenient, not when you'll get credit, but when they're drowning and need someone to throw them a rope. You were my mother's rope. I'm trying to be yours. The words settled between them like a promise. Thank you, Reese whispered. Stop thanking me. You being here letting me do this, you're giving me purpose. You're helping me keep a promise to the woman who gave me life. If anything, I should be thanking you. That night, Reese dreamed of her mother again. They were walking through a garden where flowers bloomed impossibly large and bright. You found your Banks. Baby girl, her mother said, squeezing her hand. He's just being kind. Mama, it doesn't mean. It means exactly what it looks like. He's building a home for your heart. Question is, are you brave enough to move in? Reese woke with her mother's words echoing in her ears, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she was. Chapter 8. The Father Who Chose Them. Love isn't always born from biology. Sometimes it's built in midnight diaper changes, whispered lullabies, and the choice to show up every single day. Labor came 3 weeks early, sharp and sudden as lightning. Reese woke at 2 in the morning with pain that stole her breath. She stumbled from her bed, clutching her stomach, trying to convince herself it was false labor, just practice contractions, nothing to panic about. Then her water broke, soaking through her nightgown and pooling on the hardwood floor. Kevin, she called out, her voice strangled with fear. Kevin! He appeared in a doorway within seconds, wearing pajama pants and nothing else, hair disheveled from sleep. One look at her face, and he was in full motion, grabbing the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, helping her change clothes, calling ahead to the hospital, keeping his voice steady even though his hands shook. You're okay, he said, more to himself than to her. You're both going to be okay. The drive was a blur of streetlights and contractions. Kevin held her hand while driving, talking to her constantly. Breathe with me, Reese. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Good. You're doing so good. We're almost there. The hospital became a whirlwind of nurses and monitors and questions about insurance that Kevin handled with quiet efficiency. He never left her side, translating medical jargon, advocating when she was in too much pain to speak, holding her hand through contractions that felt like her body was tearing itself apart. I can't do this, Reese sobbed during a particularly brutal contraction. It hurts too much. I can't. Yes, you can, Kevin said firmly, his face inches from hers. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You survived being abandoned. You survived homelessness. You survived your body literally shutting down. You can survive this, and I'm not leaving. I'm right here. Every second I'm here. Hours blurred together. Pain became her entire universe. But Kevin's voice remained constant, an anchor in the storm. When the doctor finally said, "One more push," Kevin was crying almost as hard as Reese was. And then the sharp, piercing cry of new life. It's a boy. Ooh, the nurse announced, holding up a tiny, wriggling, screaming miracle. Reese collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure. But when they placed her son on her chest, all the pain evaporated. He was so small, so perfect, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that squinted against the unfamiliar light. "Hi, baby," she whispered through tears. "Hi, I'm your mama. I'm here." The nurse turned to Kevin. "Would you like to cut the cord, Dad?" Kevin froze. "I'm not. Would you like to?" Reese interrupted, meeting his eyes. Kevin looked at her, then at the baby, then back at her. His eyes were swimming with tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." With trembling hands, Kevin cut the umbilical cord, officially separating mother and child into two distinct beings. But as he stood there, staring at this tiny person who just entered the world, something else connected, something invisible but unbreakable. After they cleaned the baby and ran their tests, a nurse brought him back wrapped in a blue blanket. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs, she said cheerfully. "Dad, would you like to hold him while Mom rests?" This time, Kevin didn't correct her. Reese watched as they placed her son in Kevin's arms. The baby looked impossibly small against Kevin's broad chest, a fragile bundle of possibility. Kevin stared down at the infant with an expression Reese had never seen before. Pure, unfiltered awe, mixed with fierce protectiveness and something that looked suspiciously like love. "Hello," Kevin whispered to the baby. "I'm Kevin. I'm going to take care of you, okay? You and your mama. You're my family now. And I promise you, little one, I promise you'll never doubt that you're wanted. You'll never wonder if someone will show up. I'll be there for every nightmare and every triumph and every ordinary moment in between. That's my vow to you." The baby yawned, a tiny gesture that made Kevin laugh through his tears. "He likes you," Reese said softly. "I like him too," Kevin replied, unable to take his eyes off the child. "What are you going to name him?" Reese had thought about this for months. She'd considered family names, strong names, names with meaning. But lying there, watching Kevin cradle her son like he was made of spun glass, only one name felt right. "Noah," she said. "It means rest and comfort. After everything we've been through, I want him to bring peace." "Noah," Kevin repeated, testing the name. "It's perfect." They kept mother and baby for observation, which meant Kevin spent 3 days essentially living at the hospital. He slept in the uncomfortable chair beside Reese's bed. He learned to change diapers with the focused intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. He walked endless laps around the maternity ward with Noah when the baby wouldn't stop crying, singing off-key lullabies that somehow worked better than actual music. The nurses all assumed he was the father, and neither Kevin nor Reese corrected them. It was easier that way, and maybe in the ways that mattered it was true. When they finally came home, Kevin had transformed the guest room into a nursery, a crib with soft blue bedding, a changing table stocked with diapers and wipes, a rocking chair positioned by the window for late-night feedings, mobiles and toys, and more love than Reese had ever seen, concentrated in one space. "When did you do all this?" she asked, amazed. "I had Thomas set it up while we were at the hospital." "Do you like it?" "It's perfect. The first weeks were brutal. Noah had his days and nights confused, meaning he slept peacefully during the day and screamed from dusk till dawn. Reese was exhausted, her body still recovering from labor, her emotions raw and overwhelming. Kevin handled every 2 a.m. feeding that he could, warming bottles with practiced efficiency, pacing the mansion's long hallways while Noah squirmed and fussed. He changed explosive diapers without complaint. He researched solutions for colic and reflux and gas, trying everything until something worked. One night, Reese woke to silence. Panicked, she stumbled to the nursery, only to find Kevin in the rocking chair with Noah asleep on his chest, both of them breathing in synchronized rhythm. Kevin's head was tilted back, mouth slightly open, clearly exhausted. But his arms held Noah securely, protectively. Like even in sleep he was standing guard. Reese stood in the doorway watching them, these two people who'd become her entire world, and realized something terrifying. She was falling in love with Kevin Gibson. Not because he'd saved her or provided for her, not out of gratitude or obligation or proximity, but because he'd shown her what love actually looked like when stripped of pretense and ego. Love was changing diapers at 3 a.m. Love was learning to make bottle while half asleep. Love was showing up every single day, choosing to be present, choosing to care, choosing them. Days turned into weeks. Noah started sleeping longer stretches. His cries became less frantic, more communicative. He smiled for the first time while Kevin was making ridiculous faces, and Kevin's whoop of joy woke up half the neighborhood. "Did you see that?" Kevin practically shouted, running to find Reese. He smiled. "Noah smiled at me." "Babies that young smile because of gas," Reese said, trying not to laugh at his excitement. "That was not gas. That was my son recognizing excellence when he sees it. Your son." The words slipped out before Kevin could stop them. He froze, horrified. "I didn't mean I know he's not technically. I wasn't trying to overstep." "Kevin," Reese interrupted gently. "You've been more of a father to Noah in these few weeks than most biological fathers are in a lifetime. If you want to call him your son, call him your son. Kevin looked at her, then at Noah, then back at her. What are we doing here, Reese? What do you mean? I mean, you're living in my house. I'm helping raise your child. We're functioning as a family, without actually being one. Eventually, we need to talk about what this is, what we are. Reese's heart hammered in her chest. What do you want us to be? Kevin set Noah gently in his bassinet before turning to face her fully. I want to be the person you come home to. I want to be the one who helps with homework and attends parent-teacher conferences. I want Noah to call me Dad, not because of biology, but because I earned the title through showing up every single day. He took a breath, steadying himself. I want you, Reese, not as some project I'm helping with or debt I'm repaying. I want you because when I look at you, I see home. I see the rest of my life, and it looks like this, messy and beautiful and real. Tears streamed down Reese's face. I'm terrified. Of what? Of trusting this. Of believing it's real. Of letting myself need you, only to discover it was temporary all along. Kevin crossed the space between them, taking her hands in his. I'm not Bruce. I'm not going to wake up one day and decide you're not enough. You are more than enough. You always have been. And yes, maybe I started helping you because of a promise to my mother, but I'm staying because of a promise to myself, to never let you doubt your worth again. What if I'm not ready? Then I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need because you're worth waiting for. And there, in a nursery at 4 a.m, with their son sleeping peacefully between them, Reese took her first real step toward healing. She chose to believe him. Chapter 9, Rebuilding a Queen. There's a difference between surviving and living, and Kevin was about to teach Reese the geography between the two. Morning arrived with autumn light streaming through kitchen windows, where Reese sat feeding Noah, her hair uncombed and eyes tired but peaceful. Kevin had already made coffee, still terrible, still burnt, still the sweetest gesture, and was attempting pancakes with the determination of someone convinced practice would eventually yield results. I have something to show you today, Kevin said, flipping a pancake that looked more like modern art than breakfast. If you're feeling up to it, show me what? A surprise. But you have to trust me. Reese studied his face, reading nothing but excitement there. Okay, I trust you. They drove through neighborhoods that grew progressively more familiar until Reese's breath caught in her throat. She knew these streets. She'd ridden her bicycle down this very road as a child, had walked to school along that sidewalk, Kevin, what are we doing here? He pulled up in front of a small house with chipped paint and an overgrown garden. Reese's childhood home, the place where her mother had lived and died, where Reese's earliest memories lived in the walls, where everything she'd lost had once existed. It was foreclosed years ago, Reese said, her voice hollow. Sold to someone who probably tore it down. Actually, Kevin said quietly, someone who bought it and kept it exactly as it was, hoping that someday the right moment would come to give it back to its rightful owner. He pulled out a set of keys and placed them in her trembling hands. Kevin, what did you do? I found out who bought it. Made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Had it cleaned and repaired, but left everything else untouched. It's yours again, Reese. Your mother's house is yours. Reese couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying. Come on, Kevin said gently, taking Noah from her arms. Let's go inside. The front door opened with a creak that sounded like hello. Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and memories. Everything was exactly as Reese remembered. The floorboards that squeaked in the hallway, the kitchen with its yellow curtains, the living room where her mother used to read stories before bed. Reese walked through rooms like a ghost visiting her past. In the kitchen, she found her mother's recipe box sitting on the counter, full of handwritten cards in the familiar looping handwriting she'd almost forgotten. In the living room, the photographs were back on the mantel. Her mother's smile, Reese as a gap-toothed child, her baby sister's only picture. How did you get these? Reese whispered, holding the photo of her mother. I tracked down the estate sale company. Bought back everything they'd sold. It took some time, but I found most of it. In her old bedroom, Reese found her childhood bed with the quilt her grandmother had sewn. On the nightstand was the music box that played "You Are My Sunshine," still wound and ready to sing. She sat on that bed and finally let herself break open. All the years of loss, all the accumulated grief, all the pieces of herself she'd locked away just to survive, they all came pouring out in great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Kevin sat beside her, Noah cradled against his chest, and let her cry. "I thought I'd never feel this again," Reese finally managed to say. "This feeling of home, of belonging somewhere, of having roots. You do belong. You've always belonged. The world just made you forget for a while." Over the following weeks, something shifted in Reese. With her mother's house returned, she began returning to herself too. She started taking night classes to finish her degree in early childhood education, something she'd abandoned when Bruce demanded all her time and energy. Kevin arranged childcare, drove her to campus, stayed up quizzing her for exams. "You don't have to do this," Reese told him one evening while studying. "I want to. Watching you chase your dreams feels like watching flowers bloom. Why would I miss that?" Reese also discovered that Kevin had quietly paid off every debt Bruce had left her with, the credit cards she'd maxed trying to elevate herself, the medical bills from her collapse, the loans she'd taken just to survive. Letters marked "paid in full" arrived weekly, each one another weight lifted from her shoulders. "Kevin, this is too much. It's not nearly enough. Those debts weren't yours to carry. Bruce made them while making you feel inadequate. I'm just correcting the record. You were never the problem." He was. With financial stability came breathing room to actually live instead of just survive. Reese started painting again, something she hadn't done since childhood. She filled canvases with swirls of color that expressed things words couldn't reach. Kevin would watch her work, Noah on his hip, both of them mesmerized by her creativity. "You're talented," Kevin said one evening, studying a painting of a woman emerging from storm clouds into sunlight. "It's just for fun." "No, it's cathartic. There's a difference." Reese's confidence slowly rebuilt, brick by careful brick. She laughed more freely, slept more soundly, started making decisions about her life instead of just reacting to what life threw at her. One evening, they were all in the living room, Kevin reading aloud from a children's book while Reese sketched and Noah did tummy time on a blanket. It was so ordinary, so domestic, so perfectly imperfect that Reese had to stop and marvel at it. "What are you thinking?" Kevin asked, noticing her staring. "I'm thinking that 6 months ago I was sleeping on a bench in the rain with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. And now I'm here, with my son and my home, and this person who keeps showing up like he's got nothing better to do. I don't have anything better to do. This is the better thing." Noah chose that moment to roll over for the first time, both of them erupting in cheers like he'd just won an Olympic gold medal. Kevin scooped him up, covering his face in kisses, while Noah giggled with that pure baby joy that makes the whole world make sense. Watching them, Reese realized something. She wasn't just learning to trust Kevin, she was learning to trust herself again, to trust her judgment, her intuition, her worthiness of love. Later that night, after Noah was asleep and the house was quiet, Kevin found Reese on the porch, watching rain clouds gather in the distance. "Remember the first night I found you?" he asked, sitting beside her. "It was raining just like this. How could I forget? I thought you were either a serial killer or insane, stopping for some random woman who was clearly having the worst night of her life. I couldn't not stop. My mother would have haunted me." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the storm approach. Finally, Reese spoke. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." Kevin turned to face her, concern flickering across his features. "When I was with Bruce, he made me believe I needed to be someone different to deserve love. Quieter, fancier, less myself. I spent 3 years trying to shrink myself into whatever shape he wanted, and I still wasn't enough. And then you showed up and you've just Let me be myself. You've never asked me to change or perform or prove my worth. You've just accepted that I'm enough exactly as I am, her voice caught. And that terrifies me, Kevin, because what if I wake up tomorrow and you've realized I'm actually not enough? What if this is just some extended honeymoon phase before you see all my broken pieces and decide they're too much trouble to deal with? Kevin reached for her hand but didn't speak, honoring her request to just listen. But I realized something today while watching you play with Noah. I realized that fear is just the scar tissue from Bruce's abuse. It's not truth, it's trauma, and I can't let trauma dictate my future. So I'm actively choosing to believe you, to trust this, to accept that maybe, possibly, I found someone who sees my broken pieces and considers them beautiful because they're part of my story. She met his eyes, tears streaming freely now. I'm not asking you to promise you'll never leave. I'm just asking you to promise you'll be honest. If this stops working for you, if I become too much or not enough or any of those things Bruce claimed I was, just tell me. Don't make me guess. Don't let me wonder. Just be honest, and I promise I'll survive it. Kevin was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling Reese up with him. Dance with me, he said. What? Kevin, there's no music. So what? We'll make our own. And there on the porch, with rain beginning to fall and no music playing, Kevin Gibson waltzed with Reese Blunt like they were at the most elegant ball in the world. He hummed a melody she didn't recognize, spun her gently, and held her like she was something precious. Now can I talk? He asked. Now you can talk. I won't promise I'll never leave because life is unpredictable and promises like that are meaningless. But I will promise this. I will wake up every single day and choose you. I will choose Noah. I will choose this life we're building. And on days when choosing feels easy, I'll do it with joy. On days when choosing feels hard, I'll do it with determination. But I will keep choosing every single day until my last breath. He pulled back to look at her face. You're not too much or not enough. You're exactly the right amount of you, and that's all I've ever wanted. Your broken pieces aren't flaws I tolerate. They're parts of a whole person I happen to love. The last word hung in the air between them like a held breath. You love me. Reese whispered, I love you. I love the way you sing to Noah, even though you claim you can't carry a tune. I love how you eat pancakes even when they're burnt, just so I don't feel bad. I love your laugh and your strength and your stubbornness and your kindness. I love that you chose to survive when survival seemed impossible. And I will keep loving you every day if you'll let me. Reese's answer came not in words, but in a kiss. Her first real kiss since Bruce. Her first kiss that felt like coming home instead of begging for acceptance. Her first kiss that tasted like rain and hope and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kevin rested his forehead against hers. Was that a yes? He asked. That was a yes, Reese confirmed. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but inside everything finally felt calm. Chapter 10, The Wedding That Broke a Man. The greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so beautiful that those who abandoned you can only watch from behind locked gates while you walk into forever. The garden Kevin chose for their wedding was where his mother used to bring him as a child. White roses climbed ancient trellises, creating natural archways that led to a clearing where sunlight filtered through oak trees like benediction. It wasn't grand or ostentatious, it was intimate, honest, real. Noah, now sitting up and babbling consonants that almost sounded like words, wore a tiny suit that made him look like the world's smallest businessman. Kevin had spent 45 minutes that morning trying to get the baby's hair to lay flat before Reese finally said, "He's perfect exactly as he is," and kissed both their foreheads. Reese's dress was simple elegance, cream fabric that flowed like water. Her natural hair crowned with fresh flowers, her mother's pearls at her throat. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost during her lowest moments. Her eyes held light again. She looked like herself, finally, after so long pretending to be someone else. "You're radiant," Janelle whispered, adjusting Reese's veil. "Are you ready?" "I am. For the first time in my life, I actually am." There was no father to walk her down the aisle, no family to fill the front rows. But there was Kevin, standing beneath the rose arbor with Noah in his arms, and tears already streaming down his face. There was Janelle, who'd never stopped believing Reese deserved better. There were the children from the daycare and their families, people who'd known her kindness long before Kevin entered her life. And there was something else, something none of them expected. Outside the garden gates, uninvited and unwelcome, stood Bruce Dave. He looked terrible. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with wrinkled pants and a stained shirt. His hair was unkempt, his face unshaven, his eyes hollow with something that looked like madness mixed with regret. He gripped the iron gates like a prisoner watching freedom through bars. Kevin's security had spotted him hours ago and asked whether to remove him. Kevin had looked at Reese, letting her decide. "Let him watch," Reese had said quietly. "Let him see what he threw away." Now, as music began to play, not a traditional wedding march, but Amazing Grace, the same hymn Reese used to sing to Kevin's mother, Reese walked down the aisle alone. Not because she lacked someone to give her away, but because she was giving herself. She was choosing this, claiming this, walking toward her future on her own 2 feet. Kevin watched her approach with an expression that made every woman in attendance sigh. When she reached him, he shifted Noah to one arm and took her hand with the other. "Hi," he whispered, like they were the only 2 people in the world. "Hi yourself," Reese whispered back. The ceremony was short but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, promises that had nothing to do with tradition and everything to do with truth. Kevin spoke first, his voice steady despite his tears. "Reese, when I found you in that rain, I thought I was saving you. But you've spent every day since teaching me that you never needed saving. You needed witnessing. Someone to see your strength, your grace, your unbelievable capacity to love even after love had hurt you so badly. You've made me a better man by letting me be part of your life. You've made me a father by trusting me with your son. And you've made me believe in love again by showing me what it looks like when it's real. I promise to choose you every single day. I promise to be honest even when honesty is hard. I promise to protect your heart the way you've protected mine. I promise to be the father Noah deserves and the partner you've always deserved. This is my vow, and I'll keep it until my last breath." Reese's hands trembled as she spoke. "Kevin, I came into your life broken, and you never tried to fix me. You just sat with me in the broken places until I was ready to put myself back together. You showed me that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive things. It's about showing up at 2 in the morning when the baby won't stop crying. It's about making terrible pancakes because you read that breakfast is important. It's about seeing someone at their absolute worst and saying, 'I still choose you.' You've given Noah a father, but more than that, you've given me myself back. I promise to choose you too. I promise to trust this love even when fear tells me not to. I promise to build a life with you that honors both our pasts while celebrating our future. This is my vow, and I mean it with everything I am." The officiant smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Kevin, you may kiss your bride." And Kevin did, bending to kiss Reese with a tenderness that made the entire gathering erupt in applause. Noah, sandwiched between them, reached up and grabbed both their faces, making everyone laugh through their tears. When they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, Reese's eyes inadvertently found Bruce through the gates. He'd sunk to his knees, his hands still gripping the iron bars, his face a portrait of devastation. The wealthy woman who'd lured him away had left him the moment his money ran out, which happened quickly after his company discovered he'd been embezzling funds to maintain her lifestyle. He'd lost everything, his job, his reputation, his prospects, but none of that compared to what he was losing now, watching the woman he'd discarded marry a man who cherished her. Bruce watched Kevin lift Noah high, making the baby giggle with pure joy. He watched Reese's face glow with happiness she'd never shown when she was with him. He watched them walk down the aisle together, A family built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than convenience. I threw away a queen, Bruce whispered to the empty air, his voice breaking, for a woman who was never mine. I destroyed everything real for something fake, and now I have nothing while she has everything. No one heard him. No one cared. The wedding party moved on to celebrate, leaving Bruce alone with his regrets and the locked gates between him and the life he could have had. Inside the garden, under string lights that twinkled like earthbound stars, Kevin and Reese danced their first dance while Noah dozed on Janelle's shoulder. The song was one they'd chosen together, At Last, by Etta James, because it captured the feeling of finally finding home. Are you happy? Kevin asked, spinning Reese gently. I'm more than happy. I'm free, Reese replied, and in her voice was the sound of wings unfurling after years of being caged. They danced until Noah woke and demanded to be included, so Kevin lifted him between them and they danced as three, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. This was the life Bruce had rejected. This was the love he deemed insufficient. This was the family he'd called a burden, and he would spend the rest of his days knowing he'd traded gold for dust, substance for shadow, forever for right now. Meanwhile, under the oak trees, where Kevin's mother used to tell him that true love was worth waiting for, her son waltzed with his wife and son, proving that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, so well that those who hurt you become irrelevant footnotes in a story they no longer have permission to tell. As night fell and guests departed and the garden emptied, Kevin, Reese, and Noah sat together on a bench overlooking the roses. Noah had finally fallen asleep, milk drunk and content, draped across both their laps. You know what the best part is, Reese said softly. What's that? Bruce thought throwing me away would free him, but he just traded one prison for another, while I actually got free. He's trapped in his regrets, but I'm here, living a life so beautiful it would have been impossible to imagine when I was with him. Kevin kissed her temple. You deserved beauty all along. You just needed someone who recognized it. We found each other, Reese said simply. In all the chaos and pain, somehow we found each other. Best finding of my life. They sat in comfortable silence as stars appeared overhead, mapping constellations of possibility. Somewhere beyond the gates, Bruce Dave stumbled away, heading back to an empty apartment and an emptier life. But inside the garden, inside the life he'd rejected, a family sat together beneath the stars, a family built on sacrifice and choice and the radical decision to love someone through their worst moments until they remembered how to love themselves. And that, Reese realized, was the real happy ending. Not revenge or vindication or watching Bruce suffer. The real happy ending was this: a husband who chose her daily, a son who would never doubt he was wanted, and a heart that finally believed it deserved all the love it had been freely giving. She'd carried his child alone. Kevin had carried her pain until she was strong enough to carry herself. And together they'd carried each other into a future neither had dared to dream was possible. Bruce's biggest mistake wasn't throwing them out. It was assuming they needed him to survive. They never did. They just needed to find each other,